3:02, calling the December 4th Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Board meeting to order. And starting from my left, I'm going to introduce, we have Whitney Meek, and after that is Jenny Baker. They're both new members to the board. I'm Eugene Schmitz, the chair. Corey Simonson is either late or absent. He's our co-chair. And to my right is Robin Welling. And to her right is Danny Tenenbaum. And to his right is Peter Dracos. And we do have a quorum. So moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 13th, I believe, of November. Does anybody have any additions, corrections to those minutes? Okay, and Corey made it. Thank you, Corey. Sorry. That's all right. Okay, so we have nothing on that. So we're going to move that the minutes as presented be approved. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Approval is made. Approval of the current agenda, which we have in front of us. It's it's right here in this paper. Duh. So we have a fairly good list here this time. And any corrections or additions to that? I will make one comment. Sean mentioned that under 6.2.4, the reconfiguration, that the recommended motion, that was out of City Council. That's not our recommended motion, but I believe it will be. And we may have, I'm not sure if we've gone on record before on this, I must admit. So that's just something that was put in inadvertently, so we can kind of ignore that at this point. Okay, current agenda, no corrections to that. Public comments, we have a media person here. You have anything as a citizen for commentary? Okay, so nobody else from the public, so we'll go past that. Moving on, Sergeant Amundsen is absent. He hasn't said anything that he would or wouldn't be here. I know he's pretty busy with stuff. Ben, have you heard anything from him in terms of?
No, and I think that his participation on the board is limited to when we ask him to be here at this point.
Got it. Okay, so we're going to move on to our old business, 6.2, from Ben. Okay, yeah, Ben, floor is yours.
All right, forgive me, I'm not looking at the agenda, so I'm going to try and go on memory as to which items I had in order, but I think scooter share is the first one, and yeah. Thanks, Sean. We, as you might recall, back in October, the city received a business license application from Bird Scooters. They are one of the companies that deploys electric scooters for people to rent for point-to-point transportation. In the kind of back and forth with them and the review of state and local law, we figured out, or we kind of learned that we didn't have any ordinances, let alone good ones, on the books to be able to accommodate scooters, and in fact, electric scooters. And in fact, the way that state law is currently written, that basically says that anything that isn't defined as a bike, a moped, a motorcycle, a car, an RV, they have a list of different vehicle types. Anything that isn't defined as that is a non-standard motorized vehicle, and that those aren't allowed on the road, but cities can create their own laws that allow them. That's how the state law reads, essentially. And so we are in the process of drafting local laws to allow these things. We want to we want to encourage this business to come, and we're not going to deny a business license. We don't know for sure that now that it's approved, that they will come, but we want to be as prepared as possible. And so I've been working with the attorney's office to try and draft some language to enter into Title 10, which is where we handle traffic and that sort of regulations, to try and allow these things. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is one of the things that we have to do is try and define them, and then also plug them into kind of existing ordinances. And so this is really not showing up well, not visualizing well on here, but basically making, here's a paragraph in the trails section in Title 12 showing that, well, maybe that just changed some jurisdictions. There's another, oh, here it is maybe, that, yeah, so this basically allows motorized vehicles which may be operated and parked in, so 2- and 3-wheeled bicycles, scooters, and skateboards that cannot exceed 20 miles per hour using motorized power. And that is basically the definition of a Type 1 electric bike, and it would meet the e-scooters. The Bird and Lime, the two companies that are looking at coming to Missoula potentially, their scooters are maxed out at 12 to 14 miles an hour. And so they would fall, they would safely fall under that. So that's the section in Parks law. And then here's another part in Title 10 where we would add electrically assisted bicycles to definition, and then electrically assisted scooters. And so some questions that we have remaining are, do we include classes and model code like they have in Washington State and California, or do we go through the process of defining what those are? And there's, again, this technology is new enough that people are, or there isn't quite uniform agreement yet, but there's a general understanding that a Class 1 electric bike is a pedal assist. It has a motor in it, but it only operates when you're pedaling, and it maxes out at 20 miles an hour. Class 2 is also e-assist, and I think maxes out at 30 miles an hour. And then a Class 3 can operate by itself on the motor without you pedaling, and maxes out at 28 miles an hour. And so what I think our intention here is our intention is to keep it at what is considered Class 1, because that is what the companies that offer these sharing programs bring. And so we're going back and forth internally about how do we define that. Where we're proposing they will be allowed is in bike lanes and on the trail system, and we're trying to figure out if we can legally prevent them from the sidewalks. And there's some discussion right now about that. There's some sense that if they are, if we define them as bicycles, then we can't actually
keep them off
sidewalks. And so there's some interest in trying to define them separately.
Ben, at this point, because I've kind of been thinking about this a little bit, and hopefully maybe some other people here have as well. I just want to get any comments from the board at this point about concerns that you may have about how they'll be operating in traffic and on the streets and in the bike lanes, and safety concerns that you might have that might be addressed with the company.
I've got a couple questions. How, I guess this might be up in the air, but how would you anticipate someone on a Bird scooter getting over the new Higgins Street Bridge? What should they do?
You mean after it's reconstructed in a couple of years? They would take the bike lane portion of the
shared use path?
Yeah.
And then when they get to the end, they
stay in the bike lane, and then on the hip strip, riding in the travel lane is what, that means, riding in the travel lane.
And I guess one question I had, or I guess I'm really concerned, I'm really excited about these coming to Missoula. And I think it's almost going to be universally a good thing, though of course there'll be hiccups and outrage about things. But the definitions that were proposed in the ordinance, I see you put like include electric skateboard ? I guess I'm wondering like what could be done or something should be done to sort of like future-proof the ordinance, because while today it's scooters, and, you know, there's also skateboards that I've seen, at least around Missoula. Like, you know, a couple of years ago, it was Segways, and I'm guessing some municipalities enacted ordinances that, like, were Segway specific, and now Segways you don't really see them around too much.
Golden Park, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know if the city attorney has thought about, like, trying to make a universal motorized equipment that doesn't go above a certain speed type language.
I think that there's a fine line, and we have talked about this a little bit, and so we want to be specific enough that it's clear that we're talking about these scooter companies and these sharing, you know, this kind of new wave of sharing app-based transportation option, and also being broad enough that we hopefully don't have to revise this ordinance every time something comes up. And so one of the things is that there isn't really a term that's emerging as the agreed upon catch-all term. But I guess I welcome this board. We're not finalizing, like, you know, we're not bringing this language to council yet to finalize. It will likely be January or February before we do. So what I'm asking of this board, I guess, is to consider these things, to offer suggestions like that, and we will take those under advisement, and then we'll bring final language to the board once we have it, assuming that it is, or at least draft final language before going to council for adoption, to see what you guys have to say. But yeah, shared mobility devices, or yeah, I'm not sure what a catch-all term might be, but there could be something.
I have a couple questions for you. One is, I'm sure you know that they just adopted these scooters in Spokane, and I'm sure you've looked at whatever ordinances they have done. Mm-hmm. They're on the sidewalks there. It's terrifying. So that's something, I guess, to keep in mind. And I guess the other thing on this topic is, when you're saying model code, it's not the model of a bicycle or a scooter. Is that right?
No, we're saying like using their code as a model to follow.
Gotcha. Okay. Likewise, I would say if you can make it broad to be motorized devices, you don't know what they're going to be, or whether it's even shared, I guess.
Yeah, or if it's private. Yeah, that's
bikes.
Another. Yeah, e-bikes and that sort of thing. And again, we need to start thinking about autonomous, small, like Uber Eats sending motorized coolers around to businesses. Have you guys seen those in cities? That's a thing that happens, like a autonomous, basically cooler with lunch in it that goes to different businesses, and you take your lunch out and then it keeps going down the sidewalk. I mean, we're not far from that.
You know, follow the GPS in your phone out on a trail somewhere in the rattlesnake.
Yeah, there'll be a
fly it in.
Yeah, Yogi Bear will have an app now to steal the picnic basket.
Anybody else? Great.
At what point, what's going to be made available to us for this stuff, and how soon? Are we, like, is this available so we can look it over, or?
I don't think we're quite there yet. I will send out more thorough language as soon as we have it, and like I said, I will bring, once we have kind of official draft language, I will bring it to the board. I'm hoping for the January meeting for you guys to weigh in and make some official recommendations on it. For now, I'm just kind of presenting the background and getting you guys familiarized so that when the time comes next time, we're ready to chat.
Yes. So a couple of things on the mechanics. On the scooters, they have brakes. They have a brake.
They do.
A handbrake.
Yep, front and back.
Front and back, separate, like on a bicycle.
Oh, you like on a bike? Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I've been reading a little bit, and along with the terrorizing people on sidewalks, I know that orthopedic surgeons are having a field day with these people sometimes. So I had written to you, sent you an email a little while ago. I said, do we have any ability to have the company that puts these in put on some demonstration and introduction projects where people can kind of feel these out so that they don't go zipping along at 12 miles an hour and hit a rock in the road and go flying over the handlebars into traffic or whatever. I think people who are going to have the e-bikes, if they had a shared bike thing, usually are people that have ridden a bike before. I think a lot of the people that may try to say, oh, I can take a scooter, haven't done it since they were 5 or 6.
I think the companies have an interest in doing that sort of outreach and marketing, and everything that we've heard from them is that they do a big launch event, that they have a local person that is kind of sets up shop as a way to really launch these. I know that especially Bird does a big helmet giveaway when they launch in a new community. They also do lots of outreach and have videos and different other web media about how to park these things properly. And in fact, one of them, I'm not sure if it's one of the ones that's here, but because I've looked at so many of these now, but one of the companies makes you take a picture of the scooter properly parked to finish your ride so that they know that you left it in a good place and not blocking a handicap or accessible route or a entrance to a business or something like that.
And going back to something a little bit more general about both scooters and bikes and motorized skateboards on sidewalks, would there be a possibility, and this is almost an entirely separate thing, of having a ordinance that would limit the speed of bicycle traffic or any other device traffic on the sidewalks to essentially a fast walk, like 7 miles an hour or something, which would maybe cut down on the terrorizing and potential injuries to pedestrians?
I'd like to say yes to that, but I know that the barrier that we face when even considering prohibiting them on sidewalks is that we are not allowed to write ordinances that are in contradiction of state law, and state law allows bikes and skateboards and everything on sidewalks. And so what we've heard from the attorney's office is that if we are to contradict state law, then it needs to be posted everywhere that it's reasonable to assume that people might see it. And the way that they interpret that for non-motorized or lightly motorized use like this is every corner of every intersection in the area where you're going to prohibit it. And so, for example, our handheld device prohibition is citywide, and that is in contradiction with state law. But the way that it's been interpreted that it's enforceable here is if we have it posted at every entrance to the city, because it's reasonably assumed that everyone in the city knows where things, that you can't use it, and that people coming to the city are going to have to pass one of those entrances. Whereas when you have a geographic boundary within a single jurisdiction, the idea is that it's not reasonable to expect citizens to know what side of the boundary you're on at all times, and so therefore it would have to be posted everywhere within the boundary. And that's something that people have been unwilling. No one wants to clutter the downtown streets with a sign at all 4 corners of every intersection saying, get off your bike, or bike speed limit. Yeah. Now, there are other communities that do them that have embedded stencils into the sidewalk that are not necessarily enforceable, but are socially reinforcing the notion that, or the norm, that you don't operate like a jackass on the sidewalk. Particularly Fort Collins has a really cool one that says dismount zone, and it's like a person and they're next to a bike and a skateboard, and so it's like pretty clear like what you're supposed to do. As far as I know, they're not writing tickets for it. They're just, again, trying to reinforce the social norm that you don't behave stupidly on when endanger people and yourself by riding fast on the sidewalk. That being said, we are looking into potentially drafting speed limits for the trail system. That is not controlled by state law the way that sidewalks are. And there is a sense that you, more and more with scooters and with e-bikes, and even with bikes, especially the people who are riding high-end bikes and moving quickly, that they have computers on board that tell you how fast you're going. One of the reasons that bike speed limits in general are usually not written, let alone enforced, is that most bikes don't have a speedometer on them that tells you how fast you're going. That is changing with, advances in technology, with the racing community wanting to know, how they're doing in their time trials and things like that. And then with these e-bikes, they all have computers built in, and the scooters all have computers and speedometers built into them. So the idea that we could get a speed limit on the trail and start actually enforcing it is closer to a reality than on the sidewalk.
Is it possible that that could be set up to, say, I'm just thinking of, again, especially closer in town where a lot more people walking dogs, having kids, something to the effect of an ordinance for the shared use paths that cyclists, whether regular or assisted, come down to a certain speed in the vicinity of any pedestrians. But other than that, when it's open spaces, they can.
Yeah, we'll take that into consideration for sure. I think that there's definitely some, there's some.
It's like being in a school zone when children are present.
Yeah, and that I think makes sense in general. I don't know how we would necessarily sign that, or, I think that we can communicate that to the public when educating folks, but I don't know that much language would make sense on a sign.
Sort of on the same note, I think there's a lot of value in being able to boil down, assuming that these shared scooters come to Missoula, to be able to boil down the rules for how to act as a scooter operator to one phrase, because I think, and on that note, or sort of following from that, I think it might be best to just essentially say that scooters are bikes, legally speaking. So all the same rules and regulations apply, and that will sort of create a regulatory environment where people know what the rules are, and people, the same norms that apply on the sidewalk in terms of don't bike 20 miles per hour down the sidewalk on Higgins, the same social norms apply to scooters. I think there's a lot of value in that for people. You could put that in a sign, you can put that in an ad, you can put that in a commercial, scooters are bikes, have fun, get where you need to go, be courteous. And then I think that's simpler than being scooters are bikes on the street, don't ride them on the sidewalk though, even though you may see bikes doing that because they're allowed to do that, but you're not, because there's a motor on your thing. And if it's an e-bike, you also can't go on the sidewalk. I don't know. It seems more complicated, and I think there's a lot of value in simplicity. That's my sense with it. It's just.
Another short thing could be maybe just simply, control your device.
Sure.
You're responsible for being in control, including stopping if somebody's on a sidewalk, and people walking don't signal their turns. Obviously, they're not required to. So, the onus is on the people moving faster to take care of the people moving slower.
Yeah, I agree with the desire for simplicity, and I think that's always effective. More effective communication strategy with the general public, whether it's a Facebook ad or a short video that you can post. Any type of nuance or complexity gets lost, and people's attention spans is low. And I get all that. One of the issues that we have, is that the rules for bikes are fairly simple. We have them distilled to 5 simple rules to follow. Ride on the right-hand side of the road, obey all signs and signals, use your lights at night, yield to pedestrians, use your hand signals. That's it. If you do all that, you're following the state law and the local law for riding a bike. There's still a lot of, as you know, nuance about, well, if you're on a trail and it goes across the street, you have the right to you have right of way like a pedestrian does, and that's true at crosswalks, and so that's true at trail crossings, and so it does get a little confusing. And one of the reasons is that we, in some ways, oversimplified, or we lumped bikes in with cars, I think, 40, 50 years ago, and that has not proven to be maybe the best way to handle that. And we're not going to be the ones leading the charge there. I think that bigger cities and more urban environments are going to start rewriting their whole traffic code to have bikes as a separate section, and there needs to be appropriate infrastructure before that happens. But yeah, we're stuck in this kind of gray area between biking and, we have all the vulnerabilities. When we're biking, we have all the vulnerabilities of someone walking, but we have the same kind of physics as someone driving. You can't just jump backwards on a bike. You're moving forward and can maybe veer to a side, but you can't jump out of the way that a pedestrian can. So, yeah, these are the sorts of things that we're kicking around and thinking about, but I will definitely take the request for simplicity into consideration. We would, I think, and we might take a little bit more time to do it instead of trying to rush it through this winter.
Being that we're ready to move on, if you're developing stuff along these lines, you'd be sending out any PDFs or whatever to board members?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on, 6.2.2, admin rule is that the 415? Or
Yep.
something else?
No, it is. Let me try and find where that might be. So yeah, there's two admin rules that will be coming forward. And again, this is a preview. This is not the actual discussion. The reason it's an old business is because this is something that's been brought to the board before, but we're not asking for any specific advice yet. It's just a kind of warning that this is coming up soon, and a reminder to me and my colleagues to pick this back up again. So we have, basically we've had on the books since 2008 this Administrative Rule 415, which guides the installation of bike facilities. And so this looks like it is the most recent one. It was from July of this year. And so it basically says where we will stripe bike lanes, where we position sharrows on the road, why we do these things, what are the types of guidelines that we follow. Here's a kind of list of the national guidelines that we follow, where we would, when we would mark new bike lanes, that sort of thing. And so we reference the Complete Streets policy. We talk about how we potentially determine parking removal if that's needed to install bike lanes, where we install sharrows, where they're placed, how we're beginning to talk about advisory bike lanes, which the board has seen in the California Street presentation. We don't have any in town, but it's a kind of emerging way of providing space for bikes on a road that might be too narrow. And then how we finally, replacing current bike route symbols. There are still, some of them are 25 years old now, these bike in a house symbols. This is what we refer to them as. It was an old bike lane symbol from, 2.5 decades ago that is no longer meets federal guidelines, but we still have some around town. So this just, basically where this is at is, the language we feel pretty good about, I think, in here. And there's a flow chart, an implementation matrix that I still am trying to working on developing. So looking at chip seal, so looking at different things, category, you know, the project type, the roadway, what are the boundaries of the project, the neighborhood it's in, the length, what is the functional class of the roadway, average traffic, posted speed limit, observed speed limit, or observed speeds, current level of bicycle stress, estimated current bicycle volumes, curb-to-curb width and configuration, adjacent land uses, off-street parking options, on-street parking. So a really thorough kind of identification of the segment that we're looking at, and then ultimately it will have a recommendation of do we add bike lanes or not. And so again, this is, even though I've clearly done a bunch of work on this, we're not quite ready to bring this to the board. We're just kind of letting you know that this is coming. And the reason that I put it on the agenda is because Gene had asked, he had brought some of this up at the committee of the whole meeting about how, you know, how can this board weigh in on things like sharrow placement and door zone bike lane, and is there a way that we can maybe even call out when a bike lane is in a door zone and things like that. And so this admin rule in particular about biking is, I think, a place to do that. And so basically the process from here is I need to bring this back to our traffic services staff, go over it with them one more time, then I'll bring it back to the board in an official capacity that says, you know, I'll send you a PDF in advance for you to review before the meeting, look at all the info, really think it over, and then be prepared to discuss recommendations at the board meeting. Again, I'm hoping for January on this, but it could be February. This holiday time of the year, it's difficult to catch all of the appropriate staff people in at the same time.
I just wanted to mention, thanks, Ben, especially for the new board members, that I think sometimes we look, and I'd like to ask everybody, I'm saying this before I forget it later, as you keep involved with the board, to talk to your friends, look at where you ride, ask about where they ride, maybe even stop in at a bike shop, find out where people are having issues, and maybe bring those in. It could be certain streets, certain intersections, certain conditions, what people worry about the most, et cetera, and bring those concerns up to the board through your friends and acquaintances. That would be very good. One of the things in terms of looking at some of these rules in terms of how we stripe a bike lane, how we may want to have a wider than 5 feet, obviously I think it's 6 now, near parallel parked cars, is that we, I think, have the ability, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, to look at a state ordinance which sets a minimum of something and say, well, we'd rather make sure that we go beyond the minimum of what the national standards are. So if minimum is 6 feet for something in terms of where a sharrow was placed off the curb, actually I think it's 4. And we could say that, no, we want to go beyond that, and we'd like to have it out between the 2 wheel tracks for 2 reasons. It doesn't make it a de facto bike lane where you can't really fit one. And secondly, it keeps the paint on the chip seal or paving from wearing out from people driving their vehicles over it. So I think we can look to sometimes going with a improvement in terms of raising the minimums for our local use.
The second admin rule that I want to talk about does not have a number because it has not been adopted or brought before council, or even, again, this is still kind of in staff limbo and has been for a couple years. But the idea behind this admin rule, currently called traffic control devices, including marked crosswalks, is a way to formalize the process when staff receives requests for traffic control or traffic calming devices, including marked crosswalks. So someone says, hey, I want to stop sign in my neighborhood, or I think we should have a crosswalk at this street. What this admin rule does is formalizes the process. And so basically some of the things that we are, so here again the purpose to outline the policy and procedures for addressing these requests, to direct discussion of traffic control for locations that may not meet MUTCD warrants for installation, but may require resolution due to other circumstances. So that's a big one. So the MUTCD, again, is the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices that specifies that a stop sign is a 2-foot octagon with a certain font and the letters are a certain size and it's red. That's why we don't have a purple circle stop sign in Seattle when you go there and you don't know what to do. The idea is that if we're all on the same standards, then we all understand how to get places safely. A lot of, especially traffic control devices, have a list of warrants saying that you shouldn't install this specific device until you hit a certain threshold, whether it's vehicles or crashes or some combo of both or people walking or whatever. But a lot of the MUTCD is either there are places where it contradicts itself or there are places that are left up to engineering judgment. And so engineering judgment is great, and we have smart, thoughtful people as engineers in this community working on things. The issue is that when you deviate from MUTCD and a crash or tragedy does happen, then attorneys start looking at, well, how come you didn't follow the manual's recommendation? And so we want to basically have a process in place for if we do deviate, we're documenting why we did and what the circumstances are that determine that. Here's an example of one that's in town that we're actually gonna revisit probably within the next year or two. At Linda Vista Boulevard and Lower Miller Creek, there's a T intersection there. And currently, Linda Vista has a free right turn, even though it is the bottom of the T. It has a free right turn onto Lower Miller Creek because you'd hardly ever make the left turn because there are other ways to get over to that part of the neighborhood. And there's more traffic on Linda Vista Boulevard than there are coming from the, I guess, west edge of the T, the left side of the T. And so that side has a stop sign. Well, the MUTCD says that when you have a T intersection, you should stop the T and have the through movement go the other way. But the heavy traffic volumes, or the lopsided traffic volumes really, have caused us to put the stop sign in a different location. Now that Jeanette Rankin School is moving over there, I think we're going to see some traffic patterns change in that neighborhood, and we'll revisit it as appropriate. But I just brought that up as an example where we're not following the letter of the manual. It's good to have those locations identified. So this admin rule goes through and basically says that to be effective, traffic control devices should be placed and operated in a consistent manner. They notify road users of regulations and provide warning and guidance needed for effective and efficient operation of all elements in a traffic stream, blah, blah, blah. And it defines school zones and why they're important to be consistent. Marked crosswalks, this is where it gets interesting. So by state law, every intersection is a crosswalk, and the pedestrian has the right of way at every intersection, regardless of paint on the ground. But as we all know, drivers don't necessarily yield to pedestrians at every intersection, and so there's oftentimes, especially when people use an intersection frequently, and if they're not stopped for, they say, hey, I want a marked crosswalk here, because they think that will draw driver attention. And sometimes it does, but interestingly, what's been found is that pavement markings alone do not significantly enhance the safety of a crosswalk and can even be detrimental in certain locations. If you have multiple lanes in one direction, for example, a marked crosswalk might create a false sense of security and people won't be paying as much attention for the double threat. I think that there's also when you get into high speeds and high volumes, a marked crosswalk by itself is not recommended. So the idea is that we just want to have on paper reasons that we would provide a marked crosswalk. So we'd provide appropriate crossing locations and treatments along collector and arterial roadways, ensuring pedestrians have access to visible designated crossings at a distance no greater than a quarter mile. So what this means is that we want pedestrians to not have to walk further than essentially an eighth of a mile to get to the nearest crossing of a busy road. And this is something that is not in the MUTCD. This would say that we should install a visible designated crossing along a roadway at quarter-mile intervals, even if it doesn't necessarily meet the pedestrian warrants. And so this is again, we are trying to put in writing established policies that will hopefully create better pedestrian environments. These are marked crosswalks.
Is it for above certain speeds, or that's not an issue?
Collectors and arterials. And when you get above certain speeds or certain volumes, you need more than just markings.
Right.
For example, center medians, bulb outs, pedestrian scale lighting, user-activated push-button flashing beacons. There's a whole host of different ways that you can make crossings more visible and enhance both safety and yield rate, increase the yield rate. So that is one reason, basically, that we don't want pedestrians to have to walk very far to get to a good crossing, because what happens is that people don't walk that far. They just run across the road wherever they want to, and that is more dangerous than crossing at a designated crossing. Another reason we do this is to alert motorists that a location has a higher pedestrian use, typically considered to be 25 pedestrians or 15 children or elderly users per hour at peak hour, so additional caution is necessary. To channel pedestrians to the most used and safest location, perceived and or actual, for crossing a street, and at places where motorists expect frequent crossings. To meet motorist expectations regarding those locations where pedestrians frequently cross, and to encourage pedestrians to use a marked crosswalk, thereby increasing frequency of use and ultimately its effectiveness. I see Danny ready to pounce.
No. We talked about this at the committee of the whole meeting, sort of the metrics by which you determine the pedestrian count. And, if there is no marked crosswalk, how do you count? Are there 25 or say 15 elderly or children pedestrians using the area if there's nothing to use, or if it's only an unmarked crosswalk, and so they're walking past the unmarked crosswalk because they don't, in their eyes, see that as a legitimate legal crosswalk or a safe place to cross the street. I really like the first metric. I really like that because it's almost impossible to debate. There's no room for discussion. It's just a very clear test, every quarter mile you need to have some way of crossing this arterial or Collector Street. I think, that's just, I guess I have a problem with two, just because it seems vague, and I could go to the busiest crosswalk in Missoula and find a way to count pedestrians in a way so that it's under 25, and I could also go to a less busy place and just look for people in the area and say that they are potential pedestrians who could be using this crosswalk, and it's hard to really determine what their intent, whether they're actually intending to cross the street or if they're just moseying around. I don't know.
Well, we spent, does anyone else have any comments on that particular aspect before I address it?
Do bike ped counts contribute to this, since you have historical data for these?
They can. Those typically take place at marked crosswalks. In fact, I don't know of any that are at unmarked locations, but that is definitely something a way that we can collect data. The other is that we do refer to peak hours, and so that is not our arbitrary judgment necessarily. That is, again, because this is managing requests. We work with the person who requested it for what is the time of day that we're going to be able to count the most people. And so our intent is to always count the most people, not count the fewest. The other piece of this is that this is not a shall, this is just a typically considered to be. So we're not saying that you must meet these numbers to stripe a location,
sure,
just that these locations have higher pedestrian use, which, we put in the numbers from the federal guidelines so that, again, if we do decide to stripe one that doesn't meet that, we at least are pointing in multiple ways to those federal guidelines so that we're not just arbitrarily blowing by them, we're deviating for a reason.
So let's say, you're doing someone requested it near the university and near the stadium, and you go out to do your, to assess how many pedestrians are at this one intersection or this one place where there's a potential to put a marked crosswalk, and it just happens to be the day that Pearl Jam plays the Grizz Stadium. Is that considered peak hours?
No, peak hour is considered a typical a typical, a typical rush hour, a normal occurrence. It's not a special event.
Okay.
So the same way that we build parking lots based on typical a typical busy shift, we're not doing it on Black Friday numbers. The same is true of how we count this. So like, what is a typical daily use?
In seasons?
Seasons, we look at, again, what is the highest, especially we get requests for ones a few blocks from school. We're sure to count those when school is in session and not in the summer, that sort of thing.
And so how do they interact with each other, 1 through 5, in terms of, like, let's say 1 is...
These are all reasons that we might install a marked crosswalk. None is necessarily greater than another, although hopefully a location meets multiple of these reasons.
So on number 4, where it says "and" at the end, I think it would be really cool if it said "or." Because as it's currently written, someone who is opposing crosswalks just because they want to be able to, drive without worrying about people crossing the street, they could just be like, oh, well, yeah, you checked off 1, 2, 3, and 5, but the administrative rule says "and," so, I mean, as a lawyer, you're like, well, you have to check all those boxes, and if not, then you haven't. I know this is like, seems really nitpicky, but
yeah,
that's how it's done.
Yeah, it's not a bad comment. The more that I look at these, I mean, other than number 1 and part of number 2, the rest of these are very subjective.
Yeah.
And so I think that, again, this is internal guidance. So this is for once I'm gone and the city engineer is turned over, that they can be looking at this and more or less agreeing. Even if they disagree that a location meets these, they're agreeing to the same list of criteria. So I made the change to "or," but I don't know if that has the same weight that you're.
I understand. I'm done nitpicking. That was my last thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
If these are collectors and arterials, are they state routes, and does that constrain your ability to do the striping?
It does, and thanks. Thanks for bringing that up. And so again, this is city policy, and I think we acknowledge that we have to work hand in hand with MDT once something is determined. It also, there are things that we know now that we didn't know then when things were striped, and it actually will change what does and doesn't go back after resurfacing. So for example, Orange Street was resurfaced between the bridge and the tunnel going under the freeway last year, a year or two ago. And when that happened, there used to be a marked crosswalk, just 2 lines at Orange and Pine, leading basically from the hospital to the transfer center. And now guidance says that for the amount of traffic that Orange Street sees, for the number of cars, the speeds that they go, and the number of lanes that you have to cross, it's actually more dangerous to stripe that crosswalk than to not stripe it. And so we didn't want, unless you do other things like add bulb out, center median, push button, that sort of thing. But just putting the lines down is not enough, and it actually makes it more dangerous. And so we intentionally did not restripe that crosswalk, even though it had been there before the resurfacing happened. And so there are, locations like that are tricky, because people say, oh, well, hey, my behavior didn't change. I still crossed there. Why are the stripes there? And it's, again, a lot has to do with liability and what expectations of other users is. Now, in a location like that where you're downtown, there's heavy pedestrian generators on each side. It's reason to enhance it, not to leave it unstriped forever. But enhancements cost money and take time, and when it's interjurisdictional, it's through the heart of the city, but it's owned by MDT. How do we put a project together that they will agree to and that someone will pay for? That will take longer than just throwing down paint or not.
So the paint comes out of the striping budget, is that correct? Yeah,
for the most part. Yeah, and so that's another huge constraint, is that the striping budget really has not gone up in a long time.
And so if, like, in addition to paint, signs, like the sort of diamond bright yellow signs were also deemed like a good idea for those types of intersections. Does the cost of that also come out of the striping budget, or is that a separate?
Yeah, no, striping and signing are the same budget, yep.
Okay.
So here's policy, basically. City staff will follow the standards, guidelines, and recommendations provided in the MUTCD when planning the installation or removal of any traffic control device. When planning the marked crosswalks, installation or removal of marked crosswalks, we will also refer to Federal FHWA's report, the safety of marked versus unmarked crosswalks, and when a situation may require an alternate solution to address a potentially hazardous situation, the city's Traffic and Services Group will review the situation in accordance with Section 1, procedure for addressing traffic control devices of this rule. And so here that is. So we receive a request to do something. We consult the MUTCD, the Federal Highways document, and any other applicable laws and policy documents, and then we complete the following tasks. We obtain a crash history, we review existing conditions and compare to previous conditions, we identify the surrounding uses of devices for consistency of use. So for example, a few years ago, we received requests for stop signs at a couple intersections on Burn Street up near the bistro, and even though they didn't meet the warrants for stop signs, the 3 blocks to the south all had stop signs, and so the driver's expectation was that all those cross streets stopped, and then when you kept going north, the cross streets, they were unmarked intersections, and so it led to inconsistent expectation. And so we justified adding the stop signs by saying this is consistent with the way that this neighborhood is laid out, even though none of those streets met the warrants for stop signs. We evaluate the status of ADA compliance, because anymore we've been told that just painting stripes down between 2 non-compliant sidewalks is maybe not allowed. There's some discussion about that. And so what some people think is just as simple as putting down 2 lines of paint might involve engineering and a few $1,000s of concrete to bring the curb ramps up to ADA. We review future improvement projects in the area in case the site is included as part of an upcoming project. We might wait to do crossing improvements until a project happens. One in particular that comes to mind there is we receive requests from the hospital all the time about enhancing the crosswalk across Broadway at Owen Street. Well, that is part of the conditional use or part of the approval process of the Fox Theater site project, the big redevelopment of that whole triangle. Part of the agreement is that they are going to significantly enhance that crossing at Owen, and so the city doesn't want to pay for and install that now just to have it ripped up when that project moves forward in a few years. And then as applicable, we will obtain vehicle counts, pedestrian counts, and vehicle speed counts, and we will determine whether an alternative or additional device and/or any maintenance tasks may address the situation at the site in a more appropriate or compliant way. We've definitely found, we've had requests for signs before, especially near schools. We've gone out and looked and found that the vegetation at that intersection was too close to the intersection, and so that was preventing people from seeing cars coming. We let the homeowner know, they trimmed their trees, and then the problem largely went away. And so, again, we're going to look at all these different things. So after looking at all those, we formulated a decision to approve as requested, approve with modifications, refer for an engineered solution, or deny the request. And so if the request is denied, we notify the person making the request of the group's decision and fully explain the reasons for denial. If the requester does not accept that decision, we let the Chief Administrative Officer know for advice on best way to proceed. A lot of people are just happy that we take their request seriously and actually evaluate it and get back to them. The occasional person gets really, really angry that we did not do what they asked and tries to elevate it to the mayor. And so we're just, again, putting it in writing that we're going to let people know if they don't like what we're going to let the administration know if they don't like what we're saying. If an engineered solution is necessary to address significant problems at the site, we notify the requester that the group is making a referral. An example that fairly recently that was done here, there was a request at the Palmer office complexes out on Palmer Street, the state offices out there. They said, hey, there's a bus stop across the street and there's no crosswalk. Can you put in a crosswalk? We looked at it and we, kind of followed these. Again, even though this isn't adopted yet, we more or less follow this currently. This is just kind of codifying existing practices. So someone at the state office, maybe at the VA, said, hey, we need a crosswalk here. Can you just put some paint down? And we went out and looked at it and said, well, not only does this meet the warrants for a crosswalk and all of our goals, there isn't a crosswalk for a long distance, there's a bus stop, it's highly used, blah, blah, blah. It also doesn't meet ADA. And so in order to put a crosswalk there, we can't just put stripes down. And especially for the types of people that are using that, we're going to instead put a whole engineering project together. So we cut curb ramps out and installed the domes and made the whole bus stop at that location meet ADA requirements. And so it took a little bit longer than just putting paint down, but ultimately it's a much better facility now for everyone involved. And so, yeah, we notify that they're doing it. And yeah, we just, again, go into detail here because there have been either miscommunications in the past or just disagreements about what our decisions were. And then all contact with the requester and the group's efforts should be kept electronically. And again, we have Lori Hart, the Public Works Admin Assistant, is maintaining all of these. And so even though this is pretty thorough right now, we haven't had our kind of final walkthrough as a group yet to discuss this. Hopefully this winter when things are a little bit slower, we'll have this. And again, I'll plan on bringing this to February meeting at the latest, but hopefully the January meeting, and it will send you an actual PDF to mark up and then bring back with comments and thoughts. One of the things that that could be added to this is saying what kind of crosswalk we will install. Should we be installing the ladder style everywhere? Should we be using the 2 lanes, just the 2 stripes everywhere? Should we be doing a combo, and for what reasons? Currently, the ladder style are typically used only on our main trail connections and in school zones. That's kind of following MDT's policy. I don't know that is necessary, and downtown. We also use the ladder style downtown. But I think that there's room for discussion there if that's something this board felt strongly about.
Ben, do all the crosswalks, whether it's the ladder or the 2 parallel lines, do they include the shark teeth for yielding along with that? Is that automatically done?
Not automatically. So they're done on yield streets or in yield conditions. The stop bar is put in at stop conditions. And if they are not...
I see them on Arthur.
Yep. So for the past maybe 4 years, we've been installing them with every crosswalk installation. We're looking closer at the manual. It just says it's you may do them at your discretion. And it is, again, in budget crunch, that if we can save some money there, we will. One of the ways that we've done it, this is going to seem really minimal, but we used to mark those shark's teeth. Does everyone know what I'm talking about? Those triangles that are in front of crosswalks? We used to mark those that indicate to drivers that you yield. We used to mark those from the center line all the way to the curb, even if there was a parking lane there. And so now we're eliminating the ones at the parking lane, which saves, I don't know, a little bit of, a few square feet of paint, multiplied times 120 crossings, and all of a sudden that's a significant saving. So we are looking closer at not installing them in locations where we don't feel that we have to, but for the past few years we have been installing them at every marked crosswalk.
One cool thing that I think could be added to the administrative rule would be some sort of notification to this board about any requests that refer to pedestrian or bicycle facilities, and the city's proposed action or inaction on that, I think that would be really great, just to make sure that we as a board hear what the community is requesting of the city and what is being done or what's not being done and for what reason. I think that would be really helpful. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I will, I'll add that before we bring it to traffic services.
Okay, sorry. So, for example, there's a really kind of scary intersection where Worden, North 5th, and Stoddard all meet. And the traffic coming off of North 5th gets a free right turn or a free straight, they have no stop sign there. So how would somebody in that neighborhood, who do they get a hold of at city offices?
For, to do what?
To request a stop sign or, request certain improvements in their neighborhoods.
Yeah, they can do it through basically anyone at streets or in my office or engineering. We kind of accept, or the, mayor, council, everyone, people know to forward these to traffic services, but yeah, they can come to me, they can come to Chad, they can come to Kevin, yeah, pretty much anyone, and they will make their way to us if they come through. That intersection has been looked at in the past, and there's no crash history to speak of, and most people using it are in the neighborhood and know how that one works. But yeah, the three-way stop is an interesting configuration. And it's one that if any of the other legs other than North 5th and the north side of Worden had more traffic, would probably justify changing, but currently that's the dominant movement, is that right turn off of North 5th onto Worden, and then the southbound left off of Worden onto North 5th.
Ben, is it more common for people when they see something to say, oh, I'd like a crosswalk, I'd like a stop sign, I'd like to change whatever, that they will go to their council person first and it comes in that way, or is it more likely directly to you? Because I mean, you typically look in the paper and whatever, and I don't know that the general public, unless they're listening to us right now, are aware of that way of getting things done.
They come in all sorts of ways. I'd say of the ones that that make it to discussion at traffic services, some of them are very easy to just say, no, that's not our jurisdiction, or, no, we can't do that. Someone wants just us to paint 2 stripes across Reserve Street at 7th, where we get to say, no, that's MDTs, that's not a FHWA that raises big red flags for, there's that little hill, there's all sorts of reasons we're not going to mark a crosswalk there. For things that do come to, or a stop sign on a cul-de-sac street and some new subdivision, we'd say no to that typically, without bringing it to traffic services. But other things that come to traffic services, I would say about a quarter of them come through my office, and maybe a quarter of them come through either city council or neighborhood council, okay. And then the other half come from a combination of engineering, traffic services, streets division, mayor's office, that sort of thing.
Just internally then? I mean,
No. I'm saying a citizen bringing them to,
okay.
That a friend of the city engineer caught him on the golf course and said, hey, I want this to happen. Or someone, wrote an angry letter to the mayor, and the mayor said, we got an email from the mayor's office saying, hey, will you look into this for so-and-so?
I recently, with this 5th and 6th rehab, got somebody contacted me. I'm on the University District Neighborhood Leadership Team, and they contacted me via that avenue, and they were concerned, and they were gonna carry it forward to Heather Harp, with a city council person. So. Yeah,
things come in all sorts of ways, and I think that there's that ended up getting forwarded to me. That email that.
So it went right first.
Yeah, we're pretty good at communicating with each other. It's just sometimes it takes a little bit longer than your first try.
There's other comments from people. It seems like we might be ready to move on to the next item, the draft for 2019 project list. And again, looking at what else we have, which is I think I'd like to switch that off and go right to 6.2.4, if that's okay with everybody, to take care of the 5th and 6th Street. And maybe this project list is something that maybe individually we could send items in to Ben, and I think you have some of your own for annual project list. And
no, that's not what this is. This is a list that is put together by Water, Sewer, and Public Works departments, and it's for your review.
Okay.
This is bringing it to the board about 3 months earlier than normal, so this is it's a big deal, but I'm happy to switch 5th and 6th. 5th and 6th is just a very brief update, and that's to say that it went to council last night, and council adopted or recommended, how do I want to say this? They approved 9-2 implementation of option 1C for 5th and 6th following resurfacing of those roadways, and they asked staff to prioritize resurfacing those roadways in the next available maintenance plan. Currently, they're not funded in summer of 2019, so 2020 is more likely, but it was big. There were lots of people here to speak for option 1C and a couple people speaking against it. Council members were largely in favor going into the evening and spoke articulately about why they supported it. Excuse me. And so thank you to this board and people who have been on it for a while. That this is a project that started about 5 years ago, and from some board members here, and will now be implemented sometime in the not too distant future.
And just for the new board members here, this is something that did go through the board with the blessing of the board. We've kind of pushed for this 1C as well, so it's we've aligned ourselves well with the stars, as it were. And so also just a reminder for new board members, what that is a single laning of 5th and 6th Streets between Higgins and Russell, but it maintains multiple lanes at the signalized intersections. So if you're headed westbound on 5th and you're coming from the university, it'll be 2 lanes all the way up to Higgins. You cross the light at Higgins by the Big Dipper there, and it's 2 lanes for about half a block. It'll merge into 1 lane. It'll be a single lane until you get about a half a block away from Orange Street, and then there will be a left turn lane, a through lane, and a right turn lane, and a bike lane. You'll go through that intersection, and it'll be a single lane between Orange and Russell, and then about a block and a half before Russell, it widens out to 2 lanes again, and then actually as you approach Russell Street, it becomes 3 lanes, a left lane, a through lane, and a right lane. Coming back the other direction from 6th, there'll be 2 receiving lanes off of Russell for about a half a block. It'll narrow down to 1, go up to Orange, and then when you get to Orange, there will be a left turn lane and then a combination right turn and through lane. And a bike lane all the way up to the intersection, and then you'll continue in a single lane east on 6th, and then when you get about a half block away from Higgins, it will revert to the current configuration, which is parking and on both sides and 2 lanes, 2 through lanes. Questions? Was there any, in terms of people who didn't care for it or whatever, was there anything to the effect of you're taking away a motor vehicle lane just to try to keep bicyclists happy or something to that effect?
There was a little bit of that, and council members did a really good job of saying that's not the reason for this project at all. The project is happening for safety, primarily pedestrian safety, but also driver safety and people who live along those streets and park their cars. The crash numbers on that street are pretty high. They average about 35 a year on those corridors, so one every 10 days or so, 10 or 11 days, and they only move about 8,000 cars combined. And when you look at, say, South Russell Street between Malfunction Junction and Southwest 39th, that street moves about 1.5 to 2 times as much traffic and has fewer crashes per year. And so it really is, it's a safety project for everyone and a livability project for the neighborhood. The bike lanes are gravy, and that was the way that council discussed it, and it's the way that that's what emerged in my mind as the primary reason to do the project. And so I think that there's, and again, it's a painting project. We're not moving curbs. We're not restricting access for anyone. Should that capacity be needed in the future, it's still there.
I don't recall the details of 1C. Was there any parking removed, and where was it removed from?
There's a handful of spaces on the approaches to the signalized intersections, but other than that, the parking is maintained and even enhanced by adding a couple feet to each side of the parking so that the likelihood of mirrors getting hit is going to be way reduced.
So the bike lanes are going along the parked cars. What's the bike lane width again?
So it'll be parking buffer, bike lane buffer, driving lane buffer, parking.
Right. Okay. Excellent.
Bike lane width will be, I think parking lane is now going to be 8, a 2-foot buffer, 6-foot bike lane, 3-foot or 4-foot buffer, 11-foot driver, 3-foot buffer or 2-foot buffer, and then an 8-foot parking lane, something like that.
Okay, so I think we got 6.2.4 taken care of, unless there's any other questions, comments? So back up to the project list, 6.2.3.
Yeah, so this is, not only are we looking at the list earlier, but we also have it in map form way sooner. And so this is a pretty neat tool that Lee at Missoula Water has put together, but basically looking at where construction projects are happening. And these are sewer, water, stormwater, and streets projects. And so streets projects are these pink kind, and so they're looking at Garfield in this. And I don't know what all that entails, if it's just paving. This is where the major sidewalk project is going to happen this year, and perhaps you've read in the newspaper this last week about some of the assessments, 2 of the assessments in particular being extremely high. City is working with those property owners, and hopefully they'll be able to come down. This is finishing up, I believe, the paving after the sewer project was done last year, or water, as part of Hellgate High School. Let's see, this is chip sealing the section of Orange that was repaved somewhat recently. So is this. I don't know. Oh, these are the intersections that will get the ADA upgrades this coming year. The continuation of the project that did a lot of intersections last year. Yep, that's Broadway. Making the curb ramps accessible. It's both. It's all 4 or all 8 ramps at every intersection between Madison and Owen on Broadway. and then a couple down on Higgins downtown as well. And so last year they did orange from really from the freeway, although I think the north side was largely done with the roundabout project. But they did from up there all the way down to Mountain Stevens, and then they did 5th and 6th from the Highway 12 portions, from Arthur to Higgins, and they did Higgins from Brooks to 4th. I said that one already. Yep. And so then, yeah, the remaining portion of that project in Missoula is a couple intersections in Higgins, Front, Main, and Broadway, and then Broadway from Owen to Madison. Let's see, these are chip seals that didn't happen. These were on the list last year, if you might recall, that didn't happen. So they're on the list again this year. Who knows if they will happen, but that's what those are. Here is potential chip sealing out in the portion that the city is looking into annexing out by the airport out there. And the idea is that if we're inheriting the infrastructure out there, we want to kind of preserve the pavement as best as possible. This would be a chip seal project. This Fort Missoula Road in Dearborn was repaved last year, kind of as a, using that new gas tax fund, BARSA it's called, and so that would be chip sealed. Same thing, these are new roads within the fort that are city owned that would be chip sealed. And this section of South Russell had some overlays last year, and I think that is continuing this. Let's see, if you click on it, oh, that's clicking on Fairview. What does it say? Progress pending, a thin lift overlay on that, so that would be, yeah, just a resurface thin lift overlay also on that section of Russell. So finishing, they did one of the travel lanes last year. I think it would be doing the other one this year. So anyways, I don't expect you to absorb all of this today. I don't even, I'm not quite ready to email this out to the group for a lot of perusal. I'm hoping before New Year's I will. And then the thing to keep in mind is that just because they're on this list doesn't mean that they will all happen. There's still a lot of things like bid pricing and construction, potential construction time or cost overruns. And so there's these are things that the CIP funded that are on, that are priorities for the agencies involved. It doesn't mean that all of them are going to happen. The water projects typically happen, and the sewer projects typically happen, but streets it's a little more play it by ear with them and see how far they can get and how quickly.
And what type of, when this comes around a little farther down the line, what type of input from the board typically would be looking at in terms of, bike pedestrian related?
Yeah, so the biggest one is helping the city, helping us follow our complete streets policy. So basically any of these projects that are on collectors or arterials, we should be looking at ways to improve bike and ped facilities when we're touching the road. And so that is the big one to look at, is are these streets in the bike plan? Should they get facilities per the bike plan? Should we consider either enhancing existing crosswalks or adding new markings for crosswalks? Should we be adding bike lanes and or sharrows at any locations after the asphalt gets put back?
Would there be anything in terms of prioritizing, like saying, well, we'd like to do these 3 before you do these other 3 areas, kind of thing?
There definitely is. There also, something to keep in mind is that this is the time, because this is when these streets are being resurfaced. In the case of the thin lift overlays, that usually buys us a year because they'll do that this year and then they'll go and chip seal it next year. So that does buy us a little more planning time, especially if something controversial like parking removal would be required to get a bike lane in. In other locations, this is just indicating something that's been on the, that's been under construction already. If you'll notice Russell from the Broadway down to Dakota's on here, because that's still under construction. That includes a raised bike lane and about as good facilities as we can possibly expect, having worked with MDT over 2 decades to develop this project. So, yeah, there are places where it's not necessarily something that, or sometimes like that, it's already on our radar and the ship has long sailed. In other locations, like here's an example. Here's 2 blocks of spruce, right, that are, it's a water project in an area that is too narrow to put bike lanes in, but the bike plan calls for bike lanes on spruce. It's also a water project, and so that typically does not fund relocating curb and gutter to put in bike lanes, but it is definitely within this board's purview to say, hey, knowing that this project is coming up, it would be great if the city put a project together to reconstruct those 2 blocks to be able to allow bike lanes.
Ben, just out of curiosity, what does the bid environment currently look like? Stuff gone high or low? I'm just curious.
It's extremely high. Materials and labor are very high right now, especially for concrete for some reason. Well, one of the reasons that there seems to be only 3 companies, 3 licensed and bonded companies in town that are actively bidding on city projects. And so, yeah, I'd say a good business opportunity right now is to be licensed and bonded as a concrete contractor and start bidding on city projects. The other side of that coin is that winter is a great time to go to bid, and so not all of these projects are ready, but again, so this sidewalk project in the slant streets here, this is phase 2 of an ongoing, bringing all these up to ADA and fixing broken sidewalk. We just got bids that included one of these, like one person's corner lot, the bid came in at $55,000. Yeah, and I don't know, I don't have enough detail to know why that was the case, but that person that went to the media and the story has been in the Missoulian and the city's coming under a lot of flack for that. The majority of the projects in that are under 10,000 and are therefore are mostly covered by the subsidy program, and so there are notable outliers which are look pretty egregious, but again, the bulk of this is being paid for with city road district funds. And so this is the reason that we have those numbers is that they've already been to bid and are trying, starting to put that project together already, whereas some of these other projects are not. Some of them are dependent on some of these thin lift overlays and resurfacing projects that Brian wants to do. These are, he would only be able to get them all done if the weather cooperates and the asphalt plants open early and we get good prices on them and they stay running until the end of October in the fall. And, there's a lot of variables there. So again, my hope is to get this, what this board has done in the past is they have written a recommendation to the city. They've kind of gone through item by item and say either no recommendation or add bike lanes on this, or please re-envision the project to include streetscape improvements. Again, in the example of sewer and water, I think the city's goal is to ultimately get there. Still, currently the funding is still very siloed and the people in charge of it are not quite thinking holistically about, well, hey, if we're digging up a water line, should we, instead of getting ready and just going through a normal bid process and then putting the street back as it was, maybe we should contact engineering and planning departments and see if there can be something done better. And then there's also state law, can we use water money to do that? And that's a little gray right now. Again, what I expect, I guess, is once I send this to you, typically the board has got this back to me in April or even May about their recommendations. Hopefully we'll get it by March this year, having been able to see this a bit earlier.
Okay, are there input from Ben or questions or comments regarding the project list? Peter? Oh, I thought Peter was.
I personally am thoroughly impressed that it's geographically referenced. It makes a world of difference from looking at sheets of plans and going, where the hell is this?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thanks. So are we ready to move on?
Yeah, I believe so. Under new business, looking at bylaws revisions. Now, I do have a copy. Does anybody else ever get a copy of our bylaws? Anybody? You? Yeah, okay. Right, and I'm wondering if maybe to streamline things a little bit, because a couple of these have been talked about, basically, especially for new board members, a couple of things in the bylaws had to do with the chair, me in this case, shall act as representative, and there's thoughts of changing some wordings to I may or I might designate to another person, either Corey or somebody else that has a certain interest, to be representing the board before the city council or whatever, if they are interested and willing to do that. So that's one thing that would have to change. There's a couple of others, and I'm wondering if it might be a good use of our time to simply let Ben put up a draft of the bylaw revisions and then look them over in January and give a thumbs up or modifications to that?
I think so. I was hoping after our committee of the whole meeting last week where we talked about this a little bit, I was hoping to have some time to actually put together some revisions, but I didn't get there before today. And so, yeah, if you'll bear with me for another month, hopefully I'll be able to present something, actual changes for you to consider in January. And I think we would do a reading then, and then we would vote on them in February.
Would you be able to send a PDF out to everybody a week before, or,
yeah,
or thereabouts, a few days before?
Definitely.
Okay, great. Okay, so
I was just curious if maybe it might be better and take a little bit of burden off of Ben. Maybe we set up some sort of a committee, or take this up at a committee of the whole or something like that, so we can sit down with Ben and go over this as a group, rather than just making Ben do all of the work.
Corey, I appreciate that. I think that at the COW meeting, we kind of went over these a bit last Tuesday. I'm sorry you weren't feeling well, but I think that we have a pretty good handle on what the changes are to make, and it really, they're not that complicated. Really, the only reason that I don't have them for you today is that there are a couple other coworkers that I want to run them by before making them public and bringing them to the board, just to make sure that some of the other departments that we work with are on board with agreeing to bring you guys things in a timely manner.
I think, yeah, in terms of anybody here, of course, can always just call Ben or email Ben. Hopefully everybody has his email. Anybody not have Ben's email at this point? You hand out cards. Okay, good. In terms of looking the bylaws over and saying, oh, Ben, by the way, is this going to be addressed or whatever, to say, kind of to, again, get your input in the intervening month. We're not going to have a COW meeting because it's Christmas time. So there'll be that as well. So again, feel free individually to go over the list and get in touch with Ben and say, what are you looking at doing with this part?
Yeah, thanks, Gene. At any time, if anyone has questions or concerns individually about what's happening or what's going on, you can always feel free to get in touch with me. And I just want to restate publicly that the public and open meeting laws for the state say that we can't have a quorum of board members discussing things that not in a publicly noticed meeting. But that does not prevent you from reaching out to me with direct questions, from reaching out to each other with direct questions, from sharing resources with each other. We just can't discuss those things. So, so there is a, yeah, I think that we can all, it's oddly strict, but it's also, I think, once we communicate a little bit and you realize what you can and can't do, it should make sense. If if Gene comes across an article about scooter share that he thinks we should all read, he can share that and say, hey, I think everyone on the board should read this. If Danny then says, hey, what can't happen is Danny can't say, I like what he says and what the author says in paragraph 3 and we should adopt that. We can't do that by email, but sharing the resource, that sort of thing, we can do.
And we can say, let's see if we can discuss this at our next meeting, right?
That you could do.
Yeah, I'd say you can say that. What I don't want is back and forth. I don't want you to say, let's discuss it at the next meeting, and then Peter to say, I don't think we should, and then Corey to say, no, we definitely should. And, I think that, again, but you could each put those messages to me, and I have no problem sharing that individually back, hey, thank you for sharing. Several of your colleagues don't feel as strongly as you do about this, and we have a pretty busy agenda. Do you mind if I push it back a couple months? That's, that is the sort of thing that we will, that's the back and forth that I'm allowed to kind of be a mediary between you guys. We just can't have a quorum of board members on an email discussing things.
So, Ben, a quorum being 6, so that means that, let's say...
The quorum is 5, actually, of a 9-person board.
Oh, it's just a majority, not a 2/3. Thank you. So in that case, Jenny and Whitney can get together and say, oh, we've looked over these bylaws, talk them over amongst themselves over a beer or coffee, and then come to you, the two of them together. That doesn't violate anything in terms of open meeting because it's not a quorum.
No, it doesn't. I would, I guess, urge a little bit of caution to not divide into factions just to avoid quorum rules, but yeah.
The blue.
But yeah, so again, that sort of informal communication is allowed and encouraged. We just don't want, a whole bunch of people getting together, and especially, the way that the law is written is that you can't be making decisions not at a public meeting, but as an advisory board, Bob Wachtel and I have always broadened that out to be discussion, since everything that you're deciding is just advice anyway to the city, and so that becomes a lot less hard to pin down compared to a policy or funding decision that city council makes.
Okay, looks good then in terms of the revisions thing. I think, is everybody clear and kind of on board about what's going to come down in January? That Ben will have something out to us. We can hopefully look it over, do your homework, and be ready to make a thumbs up, thumbs down revisions, et cetera, as may be happening. So that leaves us with annual priorities. Ben, some of those will probably be coming through your office and other city agencies and engineering for us to take a look at as things progress. Others of the priorities would be developed by the board in terms of recommendations. Yeah,
this was, I believe, was your request that this be put on the agenda, and this was a way for, I think, for you guys to discuss what you wanted to accomplish this year. And of course, I'm going to keep bringing issues and projects to you that arise that I want your advice and opinions on about how we should proceed as a city. But there are definitely, especially now that 5th and 6th is largely done, there's definitely opportunities for this board to set some of your own priorities. Now, I'll have to put the caveat out there that we might not have the staff time or capacity to help fulfill those, but it's at least would be good to know what you guys are thinking and are thinking you want to do in this year.
Right, well, I think as some of these things come up and we start to discuss them over the next couple of months, then again, given the staff constraints, we can start to prioritize some of these. Corey, you had mentioned something about education. So you want to give any kind of fill in a little bit about how you're looking at that? I think we sort of share some ideas. I mean, we didn't share them, but I think we're seeing along the same lines.
Yeah, and that's kind of the question that I wanted to ask is for, like, can Gene and I not necessarily make decisions about things, but can we put our heads together and come up with stuff? I just feel that there's a need to get everybody on the same page as far as motorists and bicyclists, to where there's less conflict about, oh, well, that guy shouldn't be on his bicycle on the sidewalk, or, you know, that car should have stopped, you know, whatever, you know, that kind of thing. I think there does need to be some more awareness in the community about these kinds of things. It's like, you know, maybe there's some things that are unclear that we can help clear up. You know, I'm not sure how that would get accomplished. That's something I would like to continue to talk about.
Any ideas from anybody? I know this is kind of, you know, in the moment along those lines.
I have an idea. Are the plans, like the bicycle master plan, the sidewalk plans, are those adopted? Is there money put to them? Like, it just seemed like we've gone through an exercise of documenting some great plans, but it seems to me that they may have no teeth if they're not fully adopted.
So, yeah, I guess the bike facilities master plan has no funding behind it. And that has been an ask that I've made to start funding that for the last couple of years of council, and it's repeatedly gone unfunded. The pedestrian facilities master plan, as it's currently drafted, is not funded, but we do have a sidewalk subsidy program, and there is staff dedicated to completing sidewalk projects each year. The long-range plan, that just guides the federal funding that we receive. And so that, in some ways, it is fiscally constrained. So it is based on the only projects in that are ones that we expect to be able to pay for. And then the kind of fourth plan in this suite is the community transportation safety plan. That's also unfunded. Back to Corey's question, I think this is a really good topic, and I want to pick that up in a second. Peter, I want to address Corey's kind of question and statement of need first. And so that it has currently been, I guess, staff's position that we acknowledge that we cannot reach everyone and that we offer a suite of educational services, and we realize that they have limited effectiveness, but we do the best we can. We are not opposed to anyone putting their heads together and trying to provide better safety messaging and awareness and education out there. We just the crashes are low enough, and the general state of, I mean, yeah, there are some toxic Facebook comments out there, but the general sense that I get is that people are not frothing at the mouth all the time, and so it has not been a huge priority for us. But I don't want that to be a reason to stop anyone from doing work, and public meeting laws do not prevent you and Gene from putting your heads together about ways to recommend better educational programs. But I guess until there is a some sort of proposed work plan or set of programs, I'm going to continue to tell you that I'm too busy to do much different than what I'm currently doing. But again, I don't want that to sound like I'm slamming a door. If you guys want to meet together and come up with, here, this is a 3-year process, and we think that, the first month you should do this, and the second month this, and at the end they were going to have this incredible education package, I'm all ears and very open to doing things differently. We just have not, it hasn't risen to the level of priority that other projects have.
Ben, along those lines, one of the things I was thinking of, because you go out to places, you go out to the early release, you go out to, the ambassadors go to schools, and they have other things during the summer. I know that Free Cycles has a program. One of the things I started to wonder about is the consistency of content and how it's presented. So I'm thinking that's one thing that would be useful, so that if you're going one place for information, whether it's coming out of you or coming out from Missoula in Motion on their website or whatever, that we have some consistency in terms of the message getting out in terms of, hey, let's not be salmon, let's go the right way, and let's get lights and whatever. Then along with that is appropriate sharing of space when there isn't a bike lane, any number of other things. And one of the things I was thinking of, and maybe some of the people on the board would be interested in volunteering for it, again, given your staff time, is to possibly do a sort of a pilot project, maybe during Karis Park things, out to lunch, and set up a little booth and saying, here's, whatever good bicyclist should know, whatever good driver who deals with bicyclists should know, and just have that there, and one of the things I thought of doing is having people, sit down for a quick little 5-minute presentation or whatever, and then when they get done, we kind of hand out little goodie things like, $1 off at Big Dipper ice cream or something like that, to people to try to encourage more involvement from people who think they may know it all already or really couldn't care less, but to draw people in to, kind of good content for safer traveling.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. One way that I could see this board contributing something quickly and beneficial to me, my office, and to Missoula in Motion is kind of a list of topics that they would want to see consistent information created around. So currently we do run an anti-salmoning ad, we run a lights at night ad, we run safe passing ads for both bike riders passing pedestrians on the trail and drivers passing bike riders on the street without bike lanes. We have a big lights at night campaign in the fall, and we have a general rules of the road PSA that we run. But if there are, again, specific issues that you think are worth addressing and developing messaging around, that could be very beneficial and helpful for us. And then we can be tasked with doing that. I want to move to Peter's comment and question about the plans and funding. I guess where my mind went with that, Peter, is you were hearing that these plans are unfunded. Are you suggesting that this board prioritize trying to recommend funding those plans this year?
Yes, I think whatever effort we could do to get them moving to a document that's actually gonna take some action, we should do that. Because things that are in plans, if they're adopted, will take place.
On that note, it would be cool if we could sort of pick a project to make the next 5th, 6th type project, sort of a long-term project with a concrete goal that already appears perhaps in the plans, and then, you know, get that 5-year ball rolling maybe, or maybe even shorten it to 4 or 3 years or something like that.
Yeah, I guess I'm on the right side of the the table here in terms of thinking about priorities. While I think education is an important component, I personally am more interested in seeing more systemic change, not just in terms of behaviors of motorists and pedestrians and cyclists, but in terms of thinking more broadly about ways in which we can shape our streets to be more accommodating for all modes of transport. So I think we had some really good discussions about education in the past. I think we devoted a large portion of at least 2 or 3 meetings to thinking about things like a driver-friendly, bicycle-friendly driver program. And that was, good. And I learned some things about different ways of educating both people on, or individuals on bikes and car drivers. But I think I personally would like to see more of an effort on this board in terms of systemic change and funding, and, and maybe, Ben, there's a place where you could provide us with some guidelines about, ways that we can be supportive in terms of securing funding and, seeing ideas implemented.
There's a term I came across a while ago. It was SER, standing for self-educating roads. Basically saying that if you've got, infrastructure that's being put in, the acid test, if you will, is that they get people to do the right thing essentially naturally. That reduces the amount of thinking somebody has to do in terms of, where they're going to go and how they're going to go there. Regardless of whether it's bikes or cars or pedestrians. So I think that's, along with what you said, Rob, is always a thing to keep in mind.
Ben, are there any, sorry, I don't want to cut anyone off. Ben, are there any upcoming meetings of the council or the planning board or public works committee that may pertain to stuff that we would be interested in with items?
Yeah, so the pedestrian facilities master plan is going to come before the MPO, the TTAC and TPCC in the not too distant future. I just didn't, and that's going to be on, so the January agenda is going to include a presentation on the pedestrian facilities master plan and a presentation on Missoula in Motion's strategic plan for the next 5 years. And so there'll be some education components there. But for you guys, but ultimately weighing in at TPCC, the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, in support of the adopting the Pedestrian Facilities Master Plan, and doing so at council when the time comes, that will be an opportunity to plug into kind of existing decision-making process in the very near future, or relatively near future. I think of very near future as being dinner time, but in the transportation project world, it means like within 12 to, or 2 to 4 months. Yeah, that's medium term. That's not even, yeah. That could be short term. Medium term would be 10 years. Long term would be 30.
Ben, this again is for the benefit of the newer board members in terms, I think Bob had put out at one point, and you may still have it, I don't think I have it anymore, you had an acronym list for, MUTCD and all this. Is there something that maybe you could put up as a PDF regarding the acronyms that are more typically used in these meetings?
I will share that with the board, yes.
Have that? Okay, great.
I'll share that when I get back to the office, and then we'll have a quiz in the January meeting.
Okay, I think, get back to the right side of the page here. I think we're ready to, again, in terms of annual priorities, Corey and I just kind of mentioned something kind of guys can keep your New Year's resolution list or something for everybody to say, here's an issue, an area, project that maybe the board can be discussing and try to set up priorities for the next calendar year coming up. So with that, I think we can move on to general comments, announcements from board members. Again, I'll start from my left, which is going to be Whitney. Any concerns, comments, things that are boiling over in your brain, et cetera? Okay, thank you. And from Jenny, anything? Thanks.
What is anti-salmoning?
Oh, salmoning is swimming upstream. So that's when people ride their bike against traffic.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Not an acronym, but a term that's that's used quite a bit, and now you're with it, so to speak. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Good, Corey.
I just wanted to make a comment. I'm glad to see that there are more women on
Yeah.
the board now. I'm really happy to see that. Thank you for applying. And thank you to the mayor for appointing and the council for confirming.
There's even something here in our thing that came, I guess, from the city, chapter 2.96 on the advisory board about diversity. So we got that. Yes. Robin?
No.
Okay. Danny? Peter?
The downtown master plan is currently seeking comment or collecting information of what you want to see in your downtown. So there's avenues you can let your voice be heard.
Okay.
So I just want to say, if anybody's interested, seek out the people that need to hear your voice.
And the next, to piggyback on that, the next big public participation opportunity will be mid-January, I believe, like the 15th to the 19th. The consultants will be in town, and there'll be a series of public meetings, and so that will be a big time to be involved. But I'm sure you can do it now as well.
Okay, and from my point of view, just wanted to again thank the new board members, and also especially thank Robin for some excellent points she made last meeting about trying to get more things out in writing so Ben's voice doesn't start to give out so quickly during meetings. One other thing, I'm just getting ready. Is anybody here that doesn't have a car somewhere sitting around? Okay, so most of us drive. Just a reminder, I'm going to be renewing my registration tomorrow. When you renew your registration for your car, there is an opt-in thing for supporting bicycle trails. It's a $5 opt-in when you do your registration for your car. It's not an opt-out. They got it through on statewide for an opt-in, so keep that in mind when you get your
You can contribute
notice.
More than $5 if you're so inclined
to. It can be more than $5, yes, that's true. Good point. With that,
Before adjourning, I want to make an announcement here, and I want to applaud. I'm going to embarrass Jenny right now. She did a fantastic job presenting at council last night and got 2 items approved. One is an annexation out at off Expressway, and ultimately will help improve. I think the goal is to add mixed use in that area, and so it will contribute to walkability of, say, the Potter Park neighborhoods and some of those communities out there. And then the other project was the conditional use of the new YW living and office space on 3rd Street, which will also contribute another more residents and mixed uses to an already kind of vibrant or growingly vibrant part of town. And so Jenny presented very well, and council approved these, and so we will see these projects move forward, and they will, while not directly related to biking and walking, they improve the overall environment for biking and walking, and so they're good things that are happening.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Okay, with that, in terms of upcoming meetings, there is not a committee of whole meeting in December because of Christmas, and I believe that I don't have a calendar in front of me, sorry.
The next meeting will be Tuesday, January 8th.
The 8th, okay. I wasn't sure if it was 7th or 8th. Okay, very good. So that's when we will meet again. Again, feel free to contact Ben by email or phone anytime you're looking something over and you think, hey, what about this? He's always there to listen to you and pull his hair out. With that, it looks to be 4:53, and make a motion that the current meeting of the board be adjourned. Second? Okay, any opposed? No. This meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.